My father trusted me with the contents of a hidden account for almost a decade, before my brother emptied nearly a third of it into a luxury SUV, a private club, and the costume of a life he had not earned. My father's reaction was not what you would expect from a man who had spent his life telling me that financial discipline is the foundation of a serious life. His reaction taught me that some people apply their principles only when their own name is not the one at risk. My name is Meredith. I am a payroll auditor. I have spent 14 years finding inconsistencies in other people's accounts. Missing reimbursements, inflated invoices, quiet transfers between vendors that do not match purchase orders. I am good at what I do because I trust numbers more than I trust the stories people build around them. I missed the discrepancy in my own family for almost as long. Welcome back to Rose Drama Stories. If you have ever spent years being the person your family quietly relied on, and discovered the price of that role only after the bill arrived in your name, this story is already yours. Let me explain how the account existed in the first place. My father Howard had been preparing for early retirement since before I left college. He told me he wanted me to manage it. He told me he trusted my eye more than the financial advisors at his bank. He told me he wanted to keep the account quiet because my mother Carolyn worried about money in a way that he believed was unhealthy, and he did not want her watching the balance every month. The fund started at $62,000. Over 9 years, between conservative growth and consistent additions from my father, it reached $186,400. I reconciled it monthly. I sent him quarterly summaries. I treated it the way I treat every account I audit, with documentation, traceability, and the discipline of a person who knows that small mistakes become large mistakes if no one is watching. The account was legally in my father's name, but he had given me online access, statement delivery, and full responsibility for managing it. In my mind, it had become my account to protect, even if the money was never mine. While I was watching the fund, I was not watching myself. My brother Trent is a few years younger than me. From the time we were children, the family had a phrase reserved exclusively for him. Trent is going to do something big. Nobody ever specified what. Trent was the kind of person who treated potential as a currency. He spent it endlessly. He never converted it into anything you could weigh. He rented luxury cars he could not afford. He joined private clubs with initiation fees 3 times his actual income. He attended what he called executive retreats and posted photographs of himself in linen shirts on terraces I would later learn were rented by the hour. He used the words network and brand and visibility the way other people use the word job. He had a personal coach. He had a brand photographer. He had a watch that he polished obsessively at family dinners. What he did not have was a job that paid for any of it. I paid for a lot of it. It was always one favor. His car insurance had lapsed, and he could not afford to renew it. His club dues had a late fee that would damage his standing. His state tax bill had unexpectedly become a problem. Could I help? Just this once. Just to keep things stable. I kept a private ledger. I have always kept private ledgers. It is a side effect of doing my job for 14 years. I cannot stop tracking. The number on that ledger, by the year my father gave me the manila envelope, was already more than $17,000. By the year you are about to hear about, it was over 40. Before I go further, tell me where you are watching from tonight. I always read those comments. About 2 years after my father gave me the fund, he called me on a Tuesday evening and asked if I could help him put together $12,600. He told me my mother had been hinting for years that she wanted to take an anniversary trip somewhere warm. He said he had been quietly setting money aside, but had come up short. He said he wanted to surprise her. I wrote him the check. I did not ask for documentation. I did not request to see any travel arrangements. He was my father. My mother had been with him for 4 decades. The story was kind. The story was easy to believe. Remember that check. I will come back to it. What I am telling you now, I am telling you in order. But the order is not the way I lived it. I lived it the way most people live family, in small accommodations, small generosities, small assumptions that the people you love are operating from the same set of rules you are. They were not. My father had given me access to his secret fund because he trusted my discipline. He had not given Trent official access to the fund, but he had let him stand too close to it for years, speaking about balances and old paperwork, like secrecy was the same thing as security. The fund had a checkbook attached to it from the original setup, an old one. I had never used it. It lived in a locked drawer in my apartment for almost a decade. The lock was cheap, the kind you buy to feel organized, not protected. I did not know my brother had ever seen it. I did not know he had seen enough of my father's signature over the years to copy it. I did not know that the drawer in my apartment had been opened, more than once. On the Saturdays, my brother would offer to watch the place while I was traveling for work. I would find out on a Thursday morning, the way I find most things, by opening a spreadsheet and seeing a number that did not belong there. The Thursday I noticed it, I was eating breakfast at my kitchen counter with my laptop open. I do this every other Thursday. I reconcile the fund. I match the previous balance against the current balance, account for interest, account for any deposits my father has made, and confirm that the difference is zero. The difference was not zero. The difference was $54,800. I want you to understand what an auditor feels when she sees a number like that in an account she has personally protected for 9 years. It is not panic. Panic comes later, in private, when you are alone with the consequences. The first feeling is colder. It is the feeling of a system you trusted suddenly refusing to make sense. I sat at my counter for a long time before I did anything. Then I opened the bank's history, and I started walking backward through the transactions. It took me less than 10 minutes to find what I needed. A single check, written 6 weeks earlier, drawn from the old checkbook that had been sitting in my locked drawer. The checkbook that I had never used. The checkbook I had assumed was inactive. The check had been written for $54,800. The payee was a name I knew before I finished reading it. My brother. My only brother. The signature line carried my father's name, but the handwriting was not my father's. It was close enough to clear before anyone looked closely enough to question it. My brother had forged my father's name to do it. I took a screenshot of the check. I took a screenshot of the transaction history. I made a folder on my desktop and labeled it the way I label every audit folder. Date. Account. Discrepancy amount. Then I closed my laptop and I sat with my coffee until it was cold because there was no rush. The money was already gone. By that afternoon, I had pieced together where it had gone. A down payment on a luxury SUV. The renewal of a private club membership. Something called an executive retreat in Arizona. A photographer's invoice that I would later learn produced 8 photographs of my brother standing in front of a glass building he did not work in. A watch. A series of payments to credit cards I had never seen before, but which I now realized were his. I called my father that evening. I did not call my brother. I had no interest in talking to my brother. I called my father because my father was the person who had built this system, and the system had a problem. I told him one sentence. I told him that Trent had taken $54,800 from my account. I did not tell him that the account in question was his. I wanted to see how he would respond when he thought it was my money. I also did not tell him about the forged signature. I wanted to give him every chance to ask the right question on his own. He did not ask it. He responded the way I have heard 1,000 parents respond when they are about to defend something they should have stopped defending years ago. He told me Trent was going through a difficult period. He told me Trent had pressures I did not understand. He told me he would speak to Trent, and that we would work it out as a family. Then he said, "He's desperate, Meredith. Be his sister, not his judge." I remember that sentence the way I remember the first time I balanced a quarterly close at 23. Some sentences mark the calendar for you. They divide your life into the time before you heard them and the time after. I told my father I would think about it. I had placed a temporary restriction on check activity and blocked any further withdrawals. What I had not done was close the account or erase the trail. I needed my father to see it in his own words on his own time with his own name on the page. The law was always available. The conversation with my father was not. I waited. In my work, we have a term for the kind of patience that is not the same as forgiveness. We call it documentation. You let the record build. You let the picture clarify. You do not move on a discrepancy until the discrepancy is undeniable to the person who needs to see it. I was waiting for the person who needed to see it. In late spring, my father called me. He had a meeting scheduled with a retirement advisor at his bank. He needed a current balance summary for the fund. He asked me to send it over before Friday. I sent it that night. I did not include a note. I did not explain anything. I attached the statement and one additional document, a clean PDF copy of the check Trent had written. The check with my father's name forged in the signature line. The check that drained $54,800 from the account he had been building for his own retirement for almost a decade. My father called me at 6 in the morning the next day. His voice was different. It was the voice of a man who had just understood something he had been refusing to understand for months. He asked me how this could have happened. He asked me why I had not told him. He asked me why I had let this go on without intervening. I let him ask all of his questions. Then I told him the only thing I had been waiting to say. I told him it was family when he thought I had lost it. It became theft when he saw his own name behind it. He went quiet on the other end of the line. He stayed quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, he tried to tell me that this was different. He tried to explain that he had not understood the situation when I first called. He said the fund changed things. He said the signature changed things. I told him neither of them had changed anything. He had changed. The principal had not moved. He had moved. He did not have a response to that. The conversation ended without resolution. The next thing I had to do was call my mother. I did not call my mother. I drove to her house on a Saturday morning, when I knew my father would be out at the hardware store. I brought a folder with me. The folder contained printed copies of the check, the audit timeline of the fund, my private ledger of every payment I had made on my brother's behalf over the years, and a single document I had been holding on to for almost 5 years without knowing it mattered. The document was a copy of a check I had written to my father for $12,600, dated the spring he had asked me to help him with the anniversary trip. My mother let me in. We sat at her kitchen table. She made tea because she always makes tea. I told her, in the order I had organized it, what had happened. I told her about the fund. I told her about the missing $54,800. I told her that the signature on the check had been a forgery of her husband's name. I told her about the years of small payments, the insurance, the club dues, the tax bills, the things I had been folding into my own budget without ever saying the words out loud. I told her the total on my private ledger, which by then had reached over $41,000 separate from the fund. She did not interrupt me. She listened the way my mother has always listened. With her hands folded around her cup, her face composed, her eyes doing all the work. Then I told her about the trip. I told her I had written my father a check for $12,600 years ago because he had told me he was planning a surprise anniversary trip for her. I told her there had never been a trip. I told her the money had gone, that same week, to my brother's club initiation fee. She set her cup down. She did not say anything for almost a full minute. When she finally spoke, she did not raise her voice. She asked me, very quietly, if I was certain. I told her I had the canceled check, the transfer record, and the club's intake documentation. She nodded once. She picked up her cup. She finished her tea. Then she stood up and walked to the desk in the corner of the room. She opened a drawer and took out the joint checkbook she had shared with my father since before I was born. She held it for a long time. Then she said, in the same calm voice, that she was going to open her own account on Monday. She said that she had been signing things for 41 years on the assumption that she and my father were operating from the same set of facts. She had just been informed by her own daughter that this had not been true for at least 9 of those years. She said she did not know yet what she would do with the rest of it, but she knew she would not be sharing a checkbook with him again. She also said something I did not expect. She said that she had wanted that anniversary trip for almost a decade, and she was going to take it. Not with him. By herself. To the warm place she had been quietly hoping for since she was 58 years old. She said she would book it on Tuesday. I have never been prouder of my mother than I was sitting at her kitchen table that morning. My brother's collapse began 3 weeks later. In the small ways these things always begin. The luxury SUV was repossessed. He had been making the payments out of the stolen money, and had not built any actual income behind it. The club did not renew his membership for the next quarter. My father, who had previously been quietly covering the difference whenever the bill came up short, was no longer covering anything. The executive coach turned out to be a man my brother had been paying through one of his credit cards, which had now been frozen. The photographs on his social media stopped. The watch he had worn at every family dinner for 2 years disappeared from his wrist. I saw him at a cousin's birthday party in early summer wearing a different watch, and a relative who knew about such things commented quietly that the replacement was a counterfeit. The young woman he had been dating, whom we had all been introduced to at 3 family events, was suddenly no longer attending family events. I will not pretend I was sorry about that. People who attach themselves to performance leave the performance when the lights go out. What surprised me was how quickly my brother turned, after exhausting every other option, to the only person in his life who had never asked him to be anything other than what he was. He came to my apartment on a Sunday evening in late summer. He did not call ahead. He stood in my doorway in a jacket that did not fit him as well as it once had, and he asked if he could come in for a few minutes. He said he was in a difficult position. He said the family had turned against him. He said he just needed to get through the next quarter. He said it would be a loan, properly documented this time, with a real repayment plan. I let him stand in the doorway. I did not invite him in. I told him calmly that I was not interested in his repayment plan. I told him that I was not his judge. I was also not his bank. I told him that the 2 roles he had assigned me over the years, the sister who would excuse him, and the wallet that would always fund him, had both been retired on the same afternoon. He started to speak. I stopped him. I told him that any further financial requests, from him or from our father, would be referred to a lawyer I had already selected. I told him I had spent 14 years auditing other people's books. I had finally audited my own. I closed the door. The next morning, I called the bank and made the temporary restrictions permanent. I canceled the old checkbook that had lived in my locked drawer for nearly a decade. I closed every linked authorization, every recurring transfer, every small bridge between my accounts and theirs. I moved the remaining fund balance into a new account in my father's name only, with no linked checks, no old authorizations, and no access point through me. I included a final reconciliation summary and a short note. I told him that the account was now his to manage. I told him I would not be available for any further consultation on it. I did not hear back from him for a long time. The fall after all of this, I did something I had been postponing for almost 10 years. I put a deposit on a small cabin on a quiet lake about 2 hours from my apartment. 2 bedrooms, 1 fireplace, a screened porch that faces the water. I had walked past the listing 4 times without letting myself click on it. The mortgage payment, almost to the dollar, was the amount I had been spending every month on what I now know was my brother's life. When I sit on that porch, I do not think about my brother. I do not think about my father. I think about the kind of silence that only exists when nobody is asking you for anything. I had been a payroll auditor for 14 years, and I had never once paid myself for the line item I had been carrying at home. I pay it now. My family did not lose my help when I closed the account. They lost access. And for the first time in my life, my father had to look at his son without my money standing in the way. What I want to ask you tonight is this. Who in your life has been quietly treated as a resource instead of a person? Drop their name in the comments. They deserve to be seen for what they actually carried. If this story moves something in you, hit the like button and subscribe. I am here every week with stories like this one. And I'll see you in the next one.